Friends and supporters of Kovrig and Spavor from around the world have expressed their joy in seeing the men released. This morning, we reached one of Michael Spavor's friends from Seoul, Jacco Zwetsloot. Jacco, thank you for joining us again this morning. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again, Rosemary. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm glad to have you on, delighted actually to have you on with such good news. How did you find out that your friend Michael Spavor was being released?
I went to the gym on Saturday morning, which is very unusual for me, and I came back at 10 a.m. and I received a text from a Canadian diplomat friend of mine who recently returned to Canada from Korea, who basically sent me a Twitter snapshot of the fact that Prime Minister Trudeau had announced that the two Michaels were on a plane heading back to Canada. And at that stage, everything just went wild. It was crazy.
Are you surprised at the speed at which this happened? I don't know if you had followed the Meng Wanzhou part of this that started on Friday, but are you surprised?
Yeah, just before I went to bed on Friday night, I got a message from a Canadian journalist friend of mine who's in Beijing for the Wall Street Journal, and he let me know that Ms. Meng had worked out a deal with the U.S. Department of Justice, and I called him immediately and I said, that's great. Now we just have to wait a few months for the other penny to drop and the two Michaels will be released. I really, literally thought, somewhere around 6 months could be expected, given the Kevin and Julia Garrett, or specifically the Kevin Garrett case. So to have it happen within 12 hours of me hearing the news about the deal was extraordinary and beyond my wildest expectations. And
what was your reaction, or what did you do when you found out the news?
Just started texting everybody I know who knew and who knows and who loves Michael and let them know the wonderful news, and to get ready to start watching for that moment when he steps off the plane.
Yeah. I mean, I must say
and then just check the news every hour.
Yeah, I must say they both look pretty great given what they've been through. It's pretty remarkable. Remind us a little bit about how you know Michael Spavor and what we should know about him.
We were introduced here in Seoul in 2008 through a mutual Canadian friend of ours, and in 2010, he and I traveled together with two others to North Korea on a tour. We were brought together by our common interest in North Korea. I now lead or host a weekly podcast on North Korea called the NK News. We hope to have Michael on as a guest very, very soon. And so Michael has a real love for both North and South Korea, the people of North and South Korea. He's not a political guy. He loves the people of North and South Korea, and he wants to do what he can to foster peace and exchange and communication in whatever way possible.
I don't know if you've had time to reach out to him or if he's had time to respond to you at this stage.
No, I'm in touch via with his family, but I know that they need a lot of time and space to decompress and to fill Michael in all that's happened in the last 1,020 days. So I know that when he's ready, he'll reach out.
I remember last time we spoke, you said that you had sent some books, I think, about philosophy or stoicism to Michael when he was being held. What was your hope when you? It
was a combination. Everything from palm reading to philosophy to North Korean comics to a Korean dictionary. I won't know until I get to talk to him exactly which of those books actually got through to him in his cell, and I hope he got to keep and bring back the favorite ones that are most useful to him back to Canada. But it was certainly an effort to send what we could to Michael to keep his brain as active as possible while he was in a confined space.
And you and some of Michael's friends had also, I think, been raising some money for him. Did that effort continue? What was the goal there?
We set up a GoFundMe campaign a couple of years ago, very shortly after his arrest, and we had some initial teething problems because the company shut it down, and we had to convince them that we weren't somehow funneling money to North Korea or breaking sanctions. That took some time, but we're thankful that campaign actually was going on even as he was on the plane flying back to Calgary. We were encouraging people, let's reach that 40,000 Canadian dollar goal so that he can come home and know that he won't have to worry about money for the next year or so.
If he's watching, Jacco, do you have a message for him? I know he'll probably reach out to you personally, but in the meantime.
Michael, we miss you here in Seoul. We love you. I have a bottle of North Korean snake liquor ready for when you come back to Seoul to see us again. We can't wait for that day.
Well, I'll take a picture of that when that happens. Jacco Zwetsloot, thank you again for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary. Have a great one.
Joanna Chiu is a national correspondent for the Toronto Star. She's also author of China Unbound, A New World Disorder, and she is friends with Michael Kovrig, and she joins us now from Vancouver. Joanna, nice to see you this morning.
Hey, good morning, Rosemary.
You're sort of an expert on China, but you also know Michael Kovrig, so let me start there. How did you respond to the news that he was free and that he was home?
Yeah, I think many journalists, people who worked in Beijing at the time Michael was living there, many of them knew Michael Kovrig personally. He was very social, very friendly to many people living in the city. So I think I'm just among many people who were so relieved to see the two Michaels return to Canada. But because of our background in China and knowing how these cases go, I think many people are also worried that not much actually has changed, that Beijing resorted to this very hardline tactic to try to achieve what it wanted, which was Meng Wanzhou's release. And in the end, I think, judging by the jubilant celebrations in China as Meng returned and all the Chinese state media pronouncements, I think they're seeing this as a big win. And we worry that, if you are still a Canadian living in China today, what happened might not actually make you feel safer, or that this won't happen again the next time the Chinese government feels like they could resort to hostage-taking diplomacy.
Yeah, this morning, Chinese state media put out a story, I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, saying that the two men were released because they were ill. That is, of course, not true, but it was obviously sort of a face-saving mechanism for them in case there were people who were worried that China had not come out ahead here. So talk to me about what your concerns are around that, about how China might be emboldened, actually, by how this has unfolded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the fact, like Spavor's friend said, we were preparing for the Michaels to be released maybe within months, optimistically. So for them to actually be on a plane 2 hours after Meng had left Vancouver, it just shows it was very blatantly linked. Their cases are very blatantly linked to Meng's, and they were really not trying to hide it or, do much face saving at all. It was pretty blatant. It's also important to remember that the two Michaels are not the only Canadians behind bars in China who were detained for political reasons. These include Canadians like Hussein Salil, Uyghur activist from Canada, and he's been detained since the year 2006. And all China would say is that he will be released until the year 2036. So there's just outpouring of public kind of grief and sympathy for the two Michaels who've been behind bars 1,020 days. But there are Canadians in China who have been detained for much longer, and their cases haven't gotten nearly as much attention because they weren't linked to this really high-profile Chinese executive.
Yeah, you're so right to point that out. What would you want to see now from the Canadian government? We've got Mark Garneau on a little bit later in the show to ask him, how this changes the relationship with China. It seems kind of unimaginable that we could trust China ever again. So what would you think is the future of our relationship with China?
So my book analyzes different Western countries' relationship with China, and I argue that what's happening is not just the blaming on Beijing. Actually, Western countries, government leaders have allowed things to develop where China has repeatedly taken foreigners hostage for political reasons. And not much has changed. Canada, Ottawa has promised some sort of rethink, a shift in its China policy, some sort of new strategy that would be more nuanced and would take into account China's growing authoritarianism, but this hasn't come out in the last several years. And it'd be interesting to see what the tone is going forward, whether government leaders will kind of try to make things go back to the status quo. But just from getting a sense of what Canadians feel and have reacted to the news, I think there's a lot of anger looking at the difference in the treatment of Meng in Canada versus the Michaels in China, where Meng Wanzhou was free to move around Vancouver to see who she wishes, to live, enjoy her mansion in a very elite Vancouver neighborhood. So I think that these cases, even though there have been similar cases in the past, I think it woke up a lot of people that China is not just about how much we can get from China, how the trade deals, economic ties, but also there's not really any concrete policies in any country I found that could counter or prevent these things from happening the ways that China currently tries to intimidate critics overseas, including Canadians. My research has found that Chinese officials have actually visited some Canadians' homes to tell them not to speak out and support things like the democracy protests in Hong Kong, for example. And when these Canadians go to Canadian police, sometimes police take down a report, but in all these cases, they've done very little to investigate, and we don't have any laws in the books to protect these people or to respond to some of these really complex concerns. So I think we really need a lot more expertise in government, in law enforcement, which is not existing right now.
Okay, Joanna Chiu, thank you so much for giving us your reaction and your expertise today. I appreciate it very much. Joanna Chiu is a national correspondent from the Toronto Star, and as we said there, she's got a book out called China Unbound, which speaks to much of this. Thanks so much, Joanna.